Okay, and with that, drum roll. Our first speaker here today will be Stuti with Change Without Fear. And I will stop sharing the screen now. And Stuti, I will hand it over to you without, giving anything else as an introduction, as I think you know it best.
Thanks so much, Chris. And, even though this is a virtual meeting, seeing all your smiling faces has already just cheered me up. So what a great start to the year. And I'm so happy we're keeping this going, even though things have changed. I know about change without fear, as I'm sure many of you have experienced in your life. But isn't it great that even through the change, here we are, and you guys are cheering me up, those who I can see, the names I can see. So it's great to be here. And thanks, Chris, for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully you'll all be able to see in a moment what I see here in front of me. Chris, I'm gonna ask you to just give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Fantastic. And all that needs to be done is get going. There we go. All set. Thank you. So, it's so topical. Throughout last year, we've all been talking about how the world has changed. The truth is, change is not new. As the old adage goes, we all experience change. But over the last few years, since I started working on A Life Without Fear, the topic of what does it mean to embrace change without fear has been very current. So in the next 15-20 minutes, I wanted to share some of my own thoughts on that and take you through a bit of a journey with me. And I have the pleasure of knowing many of you, but again, some of you may know, some of you may not know. My own journey of change, I've, like many AIESECers, lived across different countries. So I grew up in India, which is where I was an AIESEC. I happened to do a seed in Germany, not knowing at the time that decades later I would end up marrying a German AIESECer. I've lived in the UK for the past 15, 16, 17 years, a long time now. So there's been a lot of change, but also through my career, I've been working as an in-house and external consultant for about 20 years. And then the time for growth was upon me. So over the last 3 or 4 years, life has taken me down a path where, through discovering my own quest in life to live a life without fear and what that means, what it means to go beyond anything that's ever limited me, by understanding, the underlying root cause of what it is that was holding me back. Through diving a little bit deeper into my own journey, A Life Without Fear was born. And I say here that I'm an AIESECer for life, and that's not just words for me, The idea came to me, funnily enough, when I was in conversation with an AIESECer in the US. Days after that, I was at an AIESEC Alumni conference in Colombia, which is the first time that I ever presented a workshop. It was a little coffee chat. And that then grew into its current format, where it's a full-time business with multiple programs. So Change Without Fear is really me taking you through a little bit of my journey and my experience, but also talking through, from what I know now of working with other people, what does it mean and what does it take? So as I said, and as we like to say here on the London Underground, all change, please. The only thing that's constant in life is change, or so we've heard. But the thing is, even though we know that, and even if we may want to make some changes, it still scares us because there's a lot about it that is unknown to us. And I still experience this today, by the way. Every time I want to grow to my next step, even having done large talks, live events for 3 or 4 years now, starting to do this virtually, it's an unknown. The fear comes up again. Every time I want to launch a new program, going into a marriage, traveling somewhere you've never been before. So there's always an unknown, and that's predominantly where our fear of change comes from. But I want to start us off with a question around just food for thought. Is change really unsafe? It scares us, but is it unsafe? So I hope some of these pictures will bring a smile to your face. This is a journey that most of us in some way or another have gone through. And all of the major events in our lives, from birth to where we are now, all those great roles you've done, all the great things you've achieved, the friendships you've created, the travel you've done, all of that has been a function and a result of change. So change is absolutely not only normal, but even something to look forward to. But our fear of the unknown can hold us back. But we got to where we are today by embracing the unknown of the next step. But that's all very well for change that we would like to make in our lives. What about change that we didn't ask for? What about change that means something is going in a way different to what we wanted? And the thing that scares us in any situation of change is some fundamentally important things to us might not exist anymore. Or we may not see how we could continue to belong, perhaps in an era where we aren't doing AIESEC conferences live anymore. That was a concern for us, for many of us last year. We often feel that having to go into a new situation may impact our freedom, whether that's physical freedom or what we're allowed to express, maybe in a new role, for instance. And certainly our safety and security are of concern to us. So these are very, very real to us. And even change that we want in our lives, even when we want to go to the next step or another place, physically or metaphorically, even that can feel scary. But change that we didn't want can feel downright painful. And that then starts to lead us down a route where we wonder, well, it's happening to me and it's happening anyway, but is it good for me or is it bad for me? What can I do with this change? And of course, we know, how a change feels to us or how a situation that's new or that's coming up is going to feel. Is it exciting mostly or is it painful mostly? But how do we know if it's good for us or bad for us? And again, I'm sure you've heard people say this to you, never mind, change is good. Change is good for you. But how do we know if a particular situation of change is going to be good for us or bad for us? So we end up asking ourselves a number of questions to make sense of that to an extent. And one of the questions we ask is, will I be able to manage, or how? When we're really feeling the effect of a change we didn't ask for, one of the human questions to ask is, why is this happening to me? Or how will it work out? Or maybe, what's wrong with me? Why didn't I succeed at what I set out to succeed? Why has my job been taken away? Why am I not able to cope the way other people are? What's wrong with me? Or perhaps what's wrong with them? Why can't they see my value? Why are they changing my role? Why are they asking me to leave this group or this organization? Or why don't they understand my needs in this new situation? And again, what does it mean about me? What do I deserve? Have I done something to deserve this? What's my inherent value? And maybe there's something wrong with me, so I need to fix myself. So how do I do that? But actually, maybe I need to fix the other people. I often, especially in my household, it's often the other person I want to fix because they don't get how they should be in a certain situation, which is how I want it to be. So I'm all for fixing other people when I go down this spiral. Or how can I show the world what I'm really made of? Or maybe how can I teach someone else a lesson? There's this very painful spiral of questions that we find ourselves going down when we are caught in that human journey of change, especially when we're experiencing it as painful. Of course, some of these also come up when it's a change we were seeking, but especially when it's a change we didn't ask for. But here's the thing. The questions that we ask ourselves are what determine the direction of the change for us. We start by asking ourselves, is this good change or is this bad change? But it's these questions that lead us down a spiral. And if it's not these questions to ask, then what are the right questions to ask in change? And by the way, starting a new year, that is also change. You know, it's many of us consider it a fresh start. It's a time when we want to do things differently in our lives, or maybe pursue some ideas, visions, ambitions that we've held on to for a long time. So in any new situation, it doesn't have to be a time of global pandemic or a new career. Every day that you want to make a change, these are the two questions to ask. What would I love to gain? How can I really grow in this situation? What's important to me? And what would I love to give? I often do this particular talk for a lot of corporate teams that are in some sort of a reorganization, and very often there are redundancies in the team where people know that they'll be even leaving a job in a matter of months, and yet they're expected, they believe, to be committed and to be engaged. And these two questions are often a turning point for them. Because instead of asking, why is this happening? How will I get out of this situation? How will I be safe? When they start to ask, what would I love to gain? I've got 3 months left in the company. You know, there's always that training course I wanted to do. Now's my chance. What would I love to gain? I would love to create some great friendships that I leave this organization with. Let me make more time to speak to the people I've always wanted to speak to. What would I love to gain? Perhaps I'd love to gain more experience or a skill in a particular area. Maybe this is the time for me to try my hand at a small project that could lend me that. But every day we can ask ourselves this question and say, what is important to me today, really? And what would I love to give? What can I leave this day with? What can I leave this organization with? And in every moment, that food for thought, asking those two questions from a blank page, never mind all the pain and everything else that has gone before. These bring us essentially to building our legacy. Our legacy is what we leave behind. And in each moment, in each day, in each situation, asking ourselves, what's really important? What would I love to gain and what would I love to give? Is how we make our choice about the legacy in any moment. And of course, if you do want to take a deeper look at how one gets to change without fear, in my model, there are 5 steps to change without fear. The first step, of course, is awareness. It's an awareness that something has changed. Or perhaps there's a spark, to say, ooh, I think this is a place where I want to make a change. So there's an experience of change, there's an awareness of change. And many of you may be familiar with the change curve that, in the 60s, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced a model that talked about the stages that people go through when they're grieving. And it was especially used in the context of terminally ill patients. And it's no surprise that that model, that change curve, again, many of you would know, you go through shock, denial, anger, depression, before you then get to acceptance and integration. It's no surprise that that model has now is used around the world as a generic model for the journey of change. Because to the human mind, a situation of change feels emotionally very much like a process of grieving, a process of leaving something behind. So the first step is to be aware. But of course, if we're in denial, we're not going to do anything about the change. So once we accept and we're aware that, yes, I'm going through an experience of change here, either something externally driven, or perhaps there's a next step I desire to go through. We go to the next step, which is about choice. And Choice is a very conscious thing. In the first step, it's just an awareness of something that's happening to me. Choice says, I'm going on a change. And there are two ways that one can choose the journey of change. Either there's a need for change because something external has happened. So I say, yes, there's a need. In change management terms, we often call this a burning platform. What's going to make you want to jump? What's going to make you want to change? And the second way that one can choose to change is to say, there's a desire for change. There's something in my life that it's now time for me to grow beyond, or there's something that I now want to create and grow into. So both of these can drive our choice and our need to change. So again, that's essential, to identify the inherent either need or desire for change. The third step is when we start, again, consciously moving on this journey of change. And it sounds simple, but this is where we encounter a whole host of emotions, from fear as we know it to frustration, perhaps anger, perhaps feelings of helplessness at different points in time. Perhaps we find we aren't getting the support we wanted, or we're not able to move as fast as we want. And there's a whole host of emotions that will come up for us. But if we know that that's just what happens in this third step, then we can approach those without fear. And we say, okay, I'm going through these emotions right now. This is what my voice of fear is saying to me, but what is my choice? Am I going to go back to what was, or am I going to move forward? And that drives our action. So again, there's conscious choices that we must make every step of the way, especially in this phase where we are looking to grow beyond what was to the next new way of being. And certainly over this last year, we've experienced a growth in many ways. Even I was saying to the team earlier, like even having to use technology to do what I certainly wasn't experienced in doing before. I've had to grow into learning to use that, a very, very simple example. But what will make that change stick? What will make a transformation? For a change to stick, we've got to know, why am I doing this? There's got to be a higher inspired reason for wanting to grow further and go beyond. So my reason for using the same example for wanting to embrace technology is my higher reason is to keep doing events, is to get my voice out there, is to share with the world what it is I have to offer. And if I don't integrate that, get a new means of connecting with the world integrated into my way of being, I'm not going to be able to serve that purpose. And by the way, again, to share a little bit about my personal story, just about a few weeks ago, we started, I say we, by the way, I've hired an AIESECer into my company as well, so the AIESEC connection certainly lives on. We started recording some videos, which are now live on our LinkedIn channel. But at the time, I was cringing. I'm not naturally comfortable on camera, but there was no other option. There was no other way for me to share my message in service of others. And when the first few videos we did, I was very self-conscious. I was very much about, how am I coming across? And luckily, for better or worse, the sound didn't work so well in the first round. So we had to do a whole second round. And by that time, I had already grown, and I was already realizing that actually this isn't about me. This is about the message I want to get across. So that made it much easier. And in anything we do in our lives, it's the higher why that's going to make the change a transformation. And people often ask me, what about for example, things like the emotions of anger or something not being good in your life and you're trying to change out of it. You can grow out of it. You can make a change. But if you're reacting to something, as soon as the stimulus that was causing you to change is gone, you're going to stretch back to what was. In order to transform to the next level, there's always got to be something higher, something beyond that's going to make you want to go further. And at that point is when we start to create. When new things happen that we couldn't have imagined. When, again, we make choices, we take action, but we create experiences. You know, we come a long way from experiencing something that's happening to us to consciously creating new experiences. And by the way, taking responsibility as the leaders in our lives for further creating the experiences we love. Because by that stage, we know even if something now isn't as I want it, well, I know the 5 steps to change without fear. So I can go through that journey and change that, create that again into an experience that I would love. So it's really at each of these stages, there's one question to ask yourself, you know, what am I going through? What would I love? If you choose to go to what you would love, then the question is, how can I grow? Not how can my circumstances change, but how can I grow into the next version of me that's going to help me create what I would love? And there will come a point when you will ask yourself, why am I really doing this? If you've got a great answer for it, something that inspires you, that connects to your soul, that desire you have, it's then going to take you to the next stage where you will keep creating and you'll keep asking yourself, what am I creating next? And even if it's something that I don't like at this point, no problem. What am I creating next? It's a very empowering process. And of course, you know, this is a very, very high level view of this in a few minutes. Each of these steps is a separate module, you know, that we cover in one of our training programs. There's a lot of depth. There's a huge journey to go through in each of these. But at its simplest level, we have a choice, and we can go from something that's happening to us to great things that we create. So we can create what we would love through any change if we choose to journey to our next level. And that choice is going to be different for each of us. That next level is going to be different for each of us. And our growth, our transformation, and our creations are going to look different for each one of us. I also want to remind you, you know, as you take this away, remember that change is a very human journey. It's inevitable. We will grow and we will evolve from what is to what we would love if we are doing it consciously from choice rather than just experiencing the change. But remember that you are human and I am human and we are all human. And there will be some very real emotions coming up for us. So go easy on yourself as well. Be compassionate with yourself. And it's absolutely normal to feel different emotions as you go through. But the more you choose to grow through those emotions, the more you make a choice about where you want to go, the further you'll get to what you would love to create and the emotions of joy that come with that. So our emotions only serve to tell us where we are, but it is the choice we make through what we are feeling. I feel uncomfortable in this situation. Am I going to go back to what felt safe? Or am I going to go forward to a point where I reach my next level of comfort? Our choices will guide us through. So, in a nutshell, change without fear is knowing that we have the power to go beyond whatever the status quo is now to create something that we would love. And no matter what we do, how far we get, there's always somewhere further we can go. There's always something new, a new desire that will spark in our hearts, a new way of doing things. Sometimes it may mean we want to do more and go further. Sometimes a new way may even mean to do less, go deeper. But no matter how far we go, there's always more we can do, because where we are today soon becomes a status quo, and it's all change again. But there's one group of people that really understand what the status quo and going beyond it means. And I think you know them too. AIESEC was built, the foundations of AIESEC, and I get emotional as I say this. AIESEC was built to change the status quo, to what was normal and accepted in the world, to somewhere else we wanted to be. It was our vision that we had that took us there. And 70 plus generations later, it still drives us. And it's the same for each one of us. If you have a vision, you have the power to go beyond the status quo to create what you would love. And as I said, you know, there's always more to do. And for me personally, this is just the start. I think some of you know, and I sort of alluded to it a few weeks ago, I took another step for me, you know, a big scary step, but an exciting one at the same time. It was time to grow, and I hired somebody, you know, so now I'm a company of two. You know, there's another AIESECer in the business, so we're going to grow and change the world together. And this talk here is just the first of many events we have lined up for this year. Our human emotions come up. You know, for me, it's like, can I deal with technology? Am I making my new employee happy? Are we moving too slow? Oh my goodness, we've got so much to do. Are we moving too fast? All of these doubts will come up. You know, I went through a really tough day yesterday emotionally, because all of that just came and sat with me, and I just had to give in to my emotions and be compassionate with myself. But because I knew that that's just a stage in my journey, that's okay. You know, those days are okay too. And there's much more to do. So, you know, thank you so much for being my very first audience of this year. And this is one of many, many events, internal, external, that, you know, we're going to do throughout the year. And in the spirit of going beyond, if you enjoy this, if this is of interest to you, in fact, tomorrow it's a public webinar, but you're most welcome to attend. That'll be talk number 2 of the year for me. And it's all changed from there, because we go full on into launching a whole bunch of other programs. So I just want to say thank you very much again, AIESEC Alumni Europe. This couldn't have come at a better time. As I said, my first ever events that I did for A Life Without Fear were with the AIESEC community. So how fitting that here I am again, starting my next step of my journey with all of you again. So thank you very much. And here's to all of you, all of us, creating what we would love, changing without fear in 2021 and beyond. So thank you very much. And Chris, over to you.